He rose from the working class to the top office, serving as the president of Brazil from 2003 to 2010. Now the man, affectionately known as Lula, is considering another presidential run. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. Former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, better known as Lula, was found guilty in 2017 of corruption and money laundering. But this past March, the Brazilian Supreme Court annulled the corruption convictions, and another court ruled the 75-year-old is now free to run in next year's presidential election. As president, Lula is credited with bringing 20 million Brazilians out of poverty and achieving the lowest unemployment rate in his country's history. In a wide-ranging interview, Lula talked about his likely candidacy, addressed climate change, relations with China, and the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic by his rival and current president, Jair Bolsonaro. President Lula, thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk about the situation in Brazil right now. This was a country that was once one of the fastest-growing economies in the world. But if we look at the situation today, we see the economy is around 1%, very anemic growth in the country. Unemployment is running at just over 14%. And sadly, the country has lost 600,000 people in the COVID pandemic. In fact, you have referred to President Bolsonaro as an agent of genocide. What, in your view, has gone so badly wrong in Brazil?
Good morning, Anand. It's a great pleasure to be here in this interview with you. And I would like to start this interview, Anand, to say that Brazil actually has no government. Brazil, in the 2018 elections, went through an abnormal situation, voting for a person that has no training for politics to rule the country, to rule under democracy. He, for example, never took care of the COVID-19 because he did not believe in the coronavirus. He did not believe in the pandemic. He did not believe in the WHO, the World Health Organization. He did not believe in the behavior of other rulers and what they did. He did not believe in science. That is to say, he didn't believe in anything, but only in his own beliefs, that the pandemics was something meaningless, that was just a small flu that will kill 1 or 2 elders, but it won't reach the larger population, and that people would have to use masks, they would not have to avoid crowding, and that we had to put the blame on China. That's how he treated the pandemics until we reached to 21 million infected people and 591,000 people died by COVID-19. And when I say that the President of the Republic is a genocide, is because part of these deaths could have been avoided by him if he had worked correctly as a president should work. And this is what's going on in Brazil. There are millions of people unemployed, people under hunger or starving, and we had ended hunger, and that was announced by the UN. We got out of the hunger map in 2014 and 15, and hunger is back in Brazil. We have 100 or more people that are under food unsafety situation, people that do not eat all the necessary calories and proteins that they should intake. And so we have to rebuild the country. That is the truth of the matter.
As you say, you have to rebuild Brazil, reconstruction. When you were president, the country saw economic growth of around 7.5%. Your government also created something like 22 million jobs. What needs to change right now? What are your priorities right now to get back to those levels of economic growth?
Well, Anand, I believe that I've been saying every day in all the interviews that so that we can fix Brazil and to make Brazil to go back to growth, we have to start to do 2 things. The first thing that we have to do is to put the poor people included in the national budget. When we start discussing the national budget through the local governments, the cities, state level and federal level, you have to include the poor people in these budgets, in the public budget so that they could participate in the growth and in the income distribution. And the second thing that we have to do is that as we include the poor, the working class people in the national budget of the country, we have, on the other hand, we have to put more tax on the rich, because the rich do not pay tax here on dividends and profits. So who pays the taxes in Brazil? Those are the working people that receive just a salary and they have their income tax collected on the source. When the employer or the boss pays the salary, the income tax is already paid for or discounted. So who actually pays taxes is the working people in Brazil, because the poor that goes to the supermarket to buy a good for his food good, and if a banker goes to the supermarket, the banker will pay the same taxes, consumer tax, that the poor pays in the supermarket. So as proportion, the poor is paying much more taxes than the rich people. So we have to change that. The second thing that we have to do is to redefine the role of the state, of the government. In Brazil, like in other countries where neoliberalism took over and conservatism took over, we work every day with an idea that you should have a small government, a weak government, a weak state, a small state. The state should not do anything because it doesn't have resources. So what do we have to do? I do not advocate for a strong government or a strong entrepreneurial state that will take care of the economy as a whole, but I advocate for the state that or government that has to induce developments. And if private enterprises do not have the possibility to raise funds, the state has, because it has the competency to make the necessary investments for the main infrastructure works, and when the government will believe in itself and do the things that the government should do, obviously it would arouse the reliability on the part of the business sector, and it will win over the confidence of foreign investors that will only come to invest in Brazil if there's a marketplace for their goods that they could manufacture, and if there are consumers for the works that they intend to work on. It's not difficult to do this. What we need, Anand, is that you have to show commitment or not. And here in Brazil, the people that represent the Brazilian elite, the ruling class, they do not have the commitment with the poor people in this country. They followed the assumption that the society should be governed by people who have money, that people that can travel abroad, that people can buy whatever they want, and they never remember of the poor people. And I proved when I was president of Brazil that the poor people is not a problem. They're not part of the problem. It's part of the solution. The poor people are the solution if we include them in the national budget. And when the people start to consume, and then the wheel of the economy starts moving, and then you have more consumption, more jobs, more trade, more development. Everything is working in Brazil if you do that. That's how we did it. And I think that this is how we have to do it. There's no way that Brazil will go back to growth if we do not have the state, the government, and have the competency to invest, and the people having jobs so that they can earn a salary and live with dignity. These are the things that we want to do. And at the same time, we want to reactivate our international relations policy. Brazil is a country has no litigation with any country in the world. With China, we have an extraordinary trade partnership. Brazil has the European Union, a great trade partnership too. Brazil has a very good trade partnership with the USA too. And Brazil built a good trade relationship with Argentina and with South America and Latin America. And this is what we have to do. Brazil has to give a contribution to create an economic bloc in South America and maybe in Latin America. And Brazil needs, in the negotiations with other countries, we have to negotiate as a bloc, because there's no way out for a country alone as Brazil or in Latin America. Everybody has to get together so that we can build an economic bloc that will be competitive with China, competitive with the US, competitive with the European Union, and competitive with other countries in the world. And this is what we need to do so that we can make Brazil more attractive for investors, and so that Brazil could have credibility, international credibility, and that could become a country that has an aspiration, that has the money to invest, and those that should invest in productive things, to invest in railroads, in highways, in refineries, in hydroelectric plants and thermal plants, and to invest in solar energy and wind power and biomass power. So we have an extraordinary potential here in Brazil so that people could come and invest here. But that depends that you have to have a government that has the competency to do that. And that's what we intend to do in Brazil from 2023 onwards.
You mention alternative sources of energy. Of course, climate change is one of the biggest challenges that the world faces today, and that includes Brazil, of course. President Bolsonaro is a climate change skeptic. During his term in office, large parts of the Amazon rainforest were destroyed. There was deforestation during his term in office. How serious is that damage, and can it be reversed?
Nature always can manage to reverse the disaster that the human being causes against nature. The capacity of nature to recover itself is extraordinary. But what is very severe here in Brazil, it's that it's not necessary for you to go to deforestation so that you can plant soya beans, corn, or cattle breeding. That's not necessary. The advances of genetics, of science, and the capability for you to produce more with less hectares, that has been proven already in Brazil that it is possible. So what we need is to better use the land that we have. We have the capacity to recover the land that were downgraded, that became wastelands for many years, so that we can make this land to be used once again for food production and for meat production and other things that we need. The Amazon rainforest issue, what we have to do is 360-degree turn. When I was the president, we went to Copenhagen COP15 meeting, that we had took the commitment that it was possible to reduce the deforestation of the rainforest in 80%, and we did that. Now, what we need is to try to develop an idea that although the Amazon is a sovereign territory of Brazil, we need to share with the international community to use investment in research, and so that we can extract from that extraordinary biodiversity in the rainforest of the Amazon sources of wealth to generate jobs and have income distribution for the people that live in the Amazon region. So they have to start to perceive, to keep a tree standing is much more important than to take down a tree. And so we have to count with our international partners to do that. I was the one that made the agreement with Germany and Norway to create the Amazon Rainforest Fund. It is possible for us to take this seriously, because if the world understands that the rainforest preserved is a gain, is an asset for the humanity, the world has to help us to develop correctly the development of the Amazon region, and starting by research, and to take advantage of the ecosystem there, to take advantage of our biodiversity, and to see what we can produce there, what kind of jobs we can create in the Amazon rainforest, so that we can give to the people that live there the certainty that they will not be left behind. I do not work with the idea that the rainforest in the Amazon should be a shrine for humanity. No, I work with the idea that we need to have the competence as human beings, as people that know that the planet is only one, and we all live under this planet, and if it sinks, everybody will sink. And so we have to have the awareness that we have to take care of what we have. We have to take care of our forests, we have to take care of our water, we have to take care of our land, and we have to take care of our mineral resources, so that everybody could take advantage of all that. After all, I believe that the 21st century that was the 20th century was the century of the destruction and competitiveness, cannot continue to do the same thing in the 21st century. Science has already shown that to us, and the universities are fighting every day, are struggling, and we have experts every day telling us about the situation of our planet. And so when I went to Copenhagen in 2009, and I had a very great dispute with our friends from the European Union and with the US, is that because in Copenhagen in 2009, there was almost a conspiracy to put all the blame on pollution to China. And I said to my friends in Europe and for the US friends that China was polluting a lot, but there was other pollution history of 200 years old that not come from China, came from the England, from European countries, and from the US. And if they were going to pay for all the damage that they caused in the past 200 years for the planet, And then with that, we could demand more from China. And so what I want to say is that no one can discuss who to put the blame on. No, the truth of the matter is that the U.S. did not sign the Kyoto Agreement. The U.S. had not signed the Paris Agreement. And the truth of the matter is that the U.S. wanted the European Union would not follow the Kyoto Protocol, because it's very easy to talk about the preservation of the environment on the other's backyard. But in your own backyard, you want to deforest everything to increase your productive capacity. And that's not how the way the world has to think and move. So that's why we have to have the consciousness, the awareness, the leaders of the countries and the presidents of the countries, they should have the confidence that they should know that the planet is becoming too small for humanity.
Mr. President, we are already seeing the impact of climate change, especially on the world's most vulnerable and poorest communities. When you were president, you lifted millions of people out of poverty, but how big is the risk that people could slip back into a life of poverty right now as we see climate change intensify?
The danger is that everything that is happening bad will affect more the poor people. They're the ones that don't have housing, that they're going to live on hills, on top of hill that could have landslides. The poor people that live in an unorganized way, in a crowded way, and living on houses of 3 square meters, people sleeping on the streets, on the slums. We have to decide, is that what we want for the planet Earth? We have to decide, is that what we want for humanity? That is to say, I can't imagine that someone could keep it for yourself in their own personal bank, $160 billion, knowing that side by side where he lives, there's someone that is sleeping without money to have a breakfast and to have nothing to eat for and not have a single meal. What kind of human being are we building with this situation? And this is that has to go to the agenda. That's why last year I went to talk with Pope Francis, because I was interested to develop a campaign against inequality. And it's necessary that we should have the capability to make society stand up and show that with the production capacity that we have today in the world, and with the advance of genetic engineering, there's no explanation for us to having people to go to sleep without having a meal. We have already food production for everybody in the world to eat. And at the same time, these people don't have money to buy the food. And so it's very funny, because in the old days, we would have the competence, we didn't have the competence to food production. When we acquired more competence for food production, people then don't have the money to buy the food. If all the people had money to buy the food, obviously the world would be much more fair, and we would have a much healthier world. When we had the Lehman Brothers financial global crisis in 2008, 2009, I made a suggestion to the G20 country members that the rich countries could take advantage that they were not managing to make investments in their own countries, that they should create an international fund to make investments to help the poorest countries to develop themselves. Because when the poorer countries start to developing, they will lead to economic growth, and they're going to buy goods, sophisticated goods that the rich countries produce. That was something rational and logical, but this didn't happen, because what happened in that crisis is that the rich countries started to go on protectionism, and they did not help the underdeveloped countries or the poor countries. This is what has to change, so that it's necessary to put in the mindset of the leaders, of the rulers of the world. It seems to me unfortunate that we're going back to a xenophobia discussion. We're going back to a Cold War between China and the U.S. And so the U.S. has to understand that China has all the right to grow, that China has all the right to become the biggest or the largest economy in the world, that Brazil has the right to transform itself in a big economy. I can't imagine that only the U.S. can grow, that only the U.S. want to be the master of the planet, of the world, that the country that can do anything. No, we respect the Americans, we respect the military power of the U.S., the economic power, the scientific and technological power of the U.S. This is admired by everybody vis-a-vis the U.S., but the U.S. has to learn how to live with the growth of the other countries. I can't imagine that in Latin America, after 500 years, we didn't have one sole country that managed to develop itself. When you have a progressive government, there's a coup d'etat. every time we have a progressive government. So we have to change this rationale. So that's why I want to say, Anna, that I fully support. I'm fully against this idea of a new Cold War between China and the U.S. This is not good for China, this is not good for the U.S., and it's not good for the world. The European Union has to be very careful that it cannot become just a slice of ham in that bread sandwich that the U.S. and China are putting together. Brazil is a big country, 230 million people, and we have a great role for Latin America. And if Brazil, we don't seek hegemony, but if we know how to share with the others, there's a possibility for growth. And so that's why we have to invest a lot in education. We have to invest a lot in science and technology so that Brazil can become a country that has a production capacity and competitiveness in the international markets.
I want to turn now to Brazil's relationship with China. Under your government, the relationship made very good progress, and trade relations especially grew. But how would you characterize the relationship right now?
I inherit from former President Fernando Henrique Cardoso a good relationship with China. And I remember that during President Cardoso's term, we had a good relationship with China. Brazil had. And what did we do when we came into office? What we did was that we placed ourselves in the same equal terms in the bargaining table so that we can increase in equal terms to China. When I reached the presidency, Brazil exported $4 billion to China and imported $2 billion. Now, when I left the government, we were exporting to China $30 billion and importing $25 billion. So we went from a trade flow of 50 million to going to a trade flow of 76 billion. And so today the trade flow is of 61 billion, and Brazil has its largest surplus, trade surplus with China. And this is what Brazil has to take into account. China is very important for Brazil in our trade relations and in the geopolitical relationship. And so that's why there's no way we can accept the attempt to try to avoid China's growth. When President Hu Jintao made his first visit to Brazil, I acknowledge China as a market economy because I prefer that China to be inside the World Trade Organization to discussing with the other countries than China to be negotiating outside the WTO. This was very interesting. I had domestic issues with some business people in Brazil that didn't want to recognize China, but now everybody recognized that we made the right decision. Brazil has no conflict with China, and we should have no litigation with the U.S. either. The only thing that I believe is that the U.S., if they want to compete with China, and it has to make investments in Latin America as China is trying to do or is intending to do. There's no way that El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, or Honduras will be pleased with this situation if they're forbidden to receive investment from China. Sincerely, I should say, I was very happy when I saw China investing in Africa, and I had a great will to invest in Africa too, because Brazil has an historical debt of 350 years with China because of slavery. And so I believe that Brazil has to have, once I gave an interview for a China magazine, I heard that some people in the U.S. didn't like my interview to China because Brazil had to have a strategic agreement with China. We do, and I say it again, we should have a strategic agreement with China, but also with the U.S. and with Europe, because what Brazil has to do is to show its importance in the world, in this planet Earth. Brazil, there's a lot of things that the world needs from Brazil. And Brazil could build a partnership, strategic partnerships with the great powers in the world. And so that's why I give a lot of importance, and I treat with great respect our relationship with China, Brazil with China, and with other countries too.
President Lula, on a more personal note, you served time in prison on corruption charges, but the Supreme Court ruled that the lower court had no jurisdiction in that case. And then there was a subsequent court ruling which said that if you wanted to run for political office, you could do so. Now, there is widespread speculation that you will be running for president in 2022 in Brazil. You have not announced your candidacy. What are your future political plans?
Olha, eu estava dizendo,
Well, what I was saying, and I've been saying every day, that I'm preparing myself for that race. But I have not yet confirmed my candidacy. I'm preparing myself intellectually, trying to get to know a little bit better Brazil, talking with a lot of people, talking with other political parties. I'm also preparing myself to be in good shape, physical shape, because health is very important to guide a boat, a ship the size of Brazil. So I have to be in physical shape. And I'm going to decide all this next year because I cannot play around with Brazil, fool around with Brazil. I'm very happy that when I come back to my my political activity, there's an acknowledgement of the majority of the Brazilian people. In any polls that is being, opinion polls that are, I have the double of the second contender, that is President Bolsonaro, although I don't believe much in opinion polls 1 year before the elections. But the fact of the matter, Anand, is that in Brazil was built a lie, a big lie. The Brazilian media, it brought this lie. It brought all the lies that the prosecutor's office and the judge talked about me, and the media did not ever question if it was true or not, all those charges that were made by the judge and by these prosecutors. The media never listened to the defense, never listened to my lawyers. And so the way that the public prosecutor's office built these lies and charges against me, the media believed in that. And they sold this idea to the people every day, morning, afternoon, and night during many years. And so this was an attempt to destroy, to deconstruct me ethically and destroy me morally. But they didn't manage to do so. They did not have success. And all this was done with the agreement of the Department of Justice of the U.S. It is necessary to make it quite clear that there were interests for Petrobras, the Brazilian oil company, and there was interest to destroy the engineering industry and the engineering contracting companies in Brazil that were very strong. Engineering companies and building companies in Brazil were disputing with China, the African market, the Arab market, the Latin American market. We had construction companies from Brazil in many places in the world and building the Miami airport. It was a Brazilian engineering construction company that in the U.S. And so there was a movement to try to destroy Brazilian companies. And so, first of all, the law that we had enacted to guarantee that the oil should belong to the country, to Brazil, because we discovered in 2007 the largest deep water oil fields in the world. And with this deep oil field in the ocean, and we enacted a law that the people of Brazil would be the owner of this oil discovery. And so it was necessary to destroy this idea, this state oil company. And they set up a campaign to impeach President Dilma through a coup d'etat, and they didn't allow me to run. Since they didn't have a way to impeach me, they invented all this defamation, all these charges against me. But thank God we managed to overcome all this and win over this battle. And today I'm a free man to run for the presidency next year. And I can say to you, Anand, that if I'm well, in good shape, next year in March, if the parties agree, especially my own party, the Workers' Party, I will run for the presidency next year.
That was former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva speaking to us from Sao Paulo. That's all we have time for. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.